Hi everyone, I hope you're doing very well. Today we're going to be looking at something a little bit different from the usual gear demo stuff I've been doing recently, but it utilises said gear in what you may find is an interesting way. I'm sure a lot of you out there absolutely love the sound of a big guitar riff or an enormous solo, which can be found on countless records from the last 60 years or so. But have you sometimes wondered why? Maybe when you're playing that favourite guitar riff that you've mastered, or you've gone to the trouble of dialing in that huge guitar tone that you love for whatever reason, it never seems to sound quite as impressive as the record. Well, I may be able to show you why, especially if you're not yet up on your production and recording knowledge. As the title of the video suggests, I'm going to be discussing the technique of double tracking guitars, what that involves, and why it's such a popular choice in the studio for when you want a massive sound on your riffs or your solos. I'll also talk about how using some effects, especially in a live scenario, can give the illusion of a double track guitar sound, including some real-world examples that I myself use on gigs regularly. There's a fair bit to cover, so let's crack on, shall we? What is double tracking then? Well, at the risk of being incredibly obvious, it is simply the process of layering the exact same guitar part twice when you record it in the studio. It's a technique that is often used on vocals for very similar reasons, but in this case the guitar player will record whatever they're trying to play as perfectly as possible and then try their damnedest to replicate it exactly. Of course, this is scientifically, literally, physically impossible. But this isn't the problem. In fact, it's better that way, and I'll tell you why. Typically, from the point of having two nearly identical guitar tracks, during the mixing process, the engineer or producer will take those two guitar tracks and pan them left and right, to varying degrees, but usually equally far apart. Now, because those two waveforms that have been trying to play the same thing will be ever so slightly different in terms of dynamics and timing, it will have a sort of thickening and surprisingly powerful effect. And because of the stereo spread, it can widen the sound in an incredibly satisfying way. So it's a fantastic way of pushing a riff, chord pattern or solo line right up front in a mix. However, in case any of you are wondering, why not just play the riff perfectly once and then copy and paste it onto another track? Boom! Double track, right? In a literal sense, yes, but if you literally just duplicate the one perfect track into two and then hear them together, all you will have really done is just make the one original track sound louder. Maybe that's all you want, which is easily achieved by turning up the original track itself, but the thickness and the details from the different nuances of the two separate tracks will be lost this way. Let's have a listen to an example right now of a riff being played on its own, then that same riff being identically duplicated and then panned, and then the drastic effect that a real double-tracked riff can have. As you can probably hear, the sound that most will typically go for during the recording process is indeed the third option. It's not just for riffs either. Solos can benefit from this treatment too. Another cool way to lay down a double-tracked solo, though, is to play the two takes octaves apart. This seems to have been quite a common and favoured technique on many pop-punk and rock records from the early 2000s. I'm thinking tracks like Boulevard of Broken Dreams by Green Day, or Ruby by the Kaiser Chiefs. So let's hear an isolated example of the solo line I played at the top of the video and hear the difference that doubling and playing the octave apart can have. Now that we have a sort of grip on what double tracking is about, how we can record it in the studio and utilize it musically, let's talk about using similar sounds in a live setting through the use of effects. Before I go any further, I just want to point out that the best way to get that dual guitar sound live is, you guessed it, with dual guitars. But what if you don't have that? Well, effects can help massively. Firstly, I just want to touch on something that I've mentioned before in my Brian May tone analysis video, the use of a chorus effect. I go into some detail as to why Brian May uses that effect for the purpose of having a thicker, almost double-tracked guitar sound, and how the chorus effects will go about achieving that. So I recommend giving it a watch, just to listen to some outrageous guitar tones apart from anything else. But to summarise, using a chorus will allow you, as the single guitar player, to have a seemingly larger, more interesting sound, especially if you have access to a stereo chorus, as that is going to help you replicate the width of panning a double-tracked guitar, as we discussed in the mixing process. Check out the difference on this clip. So what about a real-world example of a doubling effect that I use when I play live? Well, like many of you cover band musicians out there comes a time for me to play the old favourite, Living on a Prayer. Whoa! Now, a distinct part of Richie Sambora's guitar tone on that track, as well as many others from the album, is this kind of chorusy, doubled-up sound that, of course, helps to thicken it out and gives it a distinct metallic edge. For years, when I was trying to replicate that tone live, I just used to use a chorus effect, as that felt like the right thing to do given the effect's popularity at the height of the 80s and all. But after a while, I stumbled on something that somehow got me closer to the record tone, which is simply a pitch shifting effect, with some very minute time and pitch alterations. Yes, that description will sound somewhat similar to what a chorus is doing, but it is also incredibly close, apart from the difference in dynamics, to the effect a double-tracked guitar would have. Especially given that once this effect is applied, I then have the original dry signal going through at 50%, and then the one slightly time and pitch altered signal doing the rest of it. So in that sense, it is very much like a double tracking scenario. Again, let's check it out. Using this tone live is a lot of fun, I must confess, especially when you get some keen guitarists or other listeners that notice the extra effort I've gone to capture the sound and vibe of the track. What I will say though is that I'm unsure whether the solo on the original was actually double-tracked or whether they used a very similar effect to what I have. Either way, it achieves a very thick and satisfying sound, which is memorable and instantly recognisable. Wrapping things up then, I hope that after watching all this you have a new appreciation for double tracking guitars, and perhaps you'll be able to spot them on your favourite records much easier. If you play such songs in your own bands, maybe now you can take some steps towards achieving that bigger sound through the use of effects, or, in the best case scenario, with another guitarist, if you have one. I love to find ways of bringing some of the tricks of the recording and production process into a live setting to enhance the experience of the audience and deliver a more memorable performance. But I hope, at the very least, you learned something new from my rambling about double tracking and effects in this video. So, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you can catch any content like this, plus anything else that you'll no doubt enjoy. I'm still offering one-on-one guitar tuition online, so you can get in touch with me about that on my socials, which I've linked below in the description as usual. Until next time folks, stay safe out there, stay positive and stay musical.